The storm rattled our windows as I stepped into the hallway and froze, hearing Lila whisper, "Not yet. They can't know." My chest tightened as I wondered how long she'd been living two lives under our roof. Jordan called from the bedroom asking if I was okay, but I didn't want him to see the fear rising in me. If love built our home, I thought, what was it hiding? When Lila noticed me, she smiled too quickly, as if covering a crack in her mask. I asked who she'd been talking to, and she claimed it was no one, but her trembling hands told another story. Then she did something that sent a chill through me. She slid a small silver key into her pocket, one I'd never seen before, and whispered, "This wasn't supposed to happen yet." I didn't know whether to call Jordan, confront her, or step back, because I suddenly felt like the real danger wasn't outside our home, but inside it. Jordan kept asking what he'd missed, but every time I tried to explain, the words tangled. Lila stood near the counter, pretending to warm her hands on a mug, though the stove wasn't even on. Something about her stillness unnerved me. I told Jordan she'd been whispering to someone, that she hid something, but he offered her a gentle smile that made me feel like the paranoid one. Lila apologized softly, claiming she just had trouble sleeping. Yet the way she held her breath between sentences made me wonder who she really feared. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was studying us, waiting for something to fall into place. When I reached for her mug to pour tea, she flinched so sharply that Jordan finally noticed. The silence that followed felt like the whole house exhaled. Whatever she was hiding wasn't small. It was big enough to make her afraid of the simplest touch. Later that morning, I heard Lila humming in the living room, an unfamiliar melody that didn't match her frail demeanor. When I stepped in, she stopped instantly, as if I'd interrupted something private. She smiled, but her eyes flicked toward Jordan's jacket on the chair. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. I remembered the sound from last night, faint rustling, like someone searching. "Did you sleep at all?" I asked. She nodded, though her eyelids looked heavy. I moved to pick up the jacket, wanting to reassure myself nothing was missing. But Lila stepped forward and said, "Don't." I already checked. For laundry. The words didn't match the tremor in her voice. I looked at her hands. Too steady, too prepared. Someone who feared being caught didn't hide fear. They hid certainty. And I finally realized she wasn't overwhelmed. She was waiting. Jordan left for his shift, leaving the house wrapped in a strange quiet. Lila drifted from room to room, touching small objects like she was memorizing the layout. I followed her discreetly, trying to understand what she was looking for. At one point, she paused at our family photo on the shelf, one taken months before we met her, and her fingers hovered above my face in the picture. "You're lucky," she murmured. I asked what she meant, and she blinked hard as if waking from a dream. She insisted she just liked the lighting. That was a lie so thin it almost tore in the air. When she walked away, her shoulders sagged, revealing the weight of something she carried alone, or something she carried for someone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floor, the hum of the fridge, the faint shift of fabric in the hallway. When I cracked the door open, I saw Lila sitting on the floor with her back to the wall, knees pulled up, staring at the silver key balanced on her palm. She whispered something I couldn't hear, then closed her fist around it. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I wanted to ask what it opened, who it belonged to, and why she guarded it like it was life or death. But before I could move, she slipped the key into her pocket and stood, her expression blank. She walked toward her room without noticing me. The moment she disappeared behind the door, the hallway seemed to sigh with relief. And I knew the real secret hadn't even surfaced yet. By the next morning, Jordan seemed convinced Lila just needed kindness. But every gentle look he gave her made something twist inside me. Lila kept thanking him softly, like she was rehearsing gratitude rather than feeling it. When I asked again about the call she'd taken the night before, she froze, then claimed it was from a cousin she no longer spoke to. Jordan accepted the explanation instantly, but I saw the hesitation in her eyes, the flicker of someone choosing their next lie. She drifted around the kitchen as if mapping exits, noting corners where people couldn't see her hands. When she reached for a plate, she dropped it, and before it even shattered, she whispered, "I didn't mean to." But something about her voice made me wonder if she meant something else entirely. Something bigger, something she feared we might uncover before she was ready. Later, while Jordan was showering, I found Lila sitting quietly on the couch, staring at her phone as if afraid to touch it. When I stepped closer, she startled, hugging it to her chest. I asked if she wanted breakfast, but she shook her head and whispered, "Not yet." Her eyes darted toward the hallway like she expected someone to appear. I sat across from her and asked about her family, about where she grew up, but she kept giving half answers that didn't match the way she behaved. Someone running, not someone visiting. She finally set her phone down, screen face down, and said she appreciated us. But appreciation shouldn't sound like an apology. When Jordan entered, she straightened instantly, performing calmness like a well-practiced role. And the moment he smiled at her, I felt a truth I didn't want to face. Lila wasn't just hiding something from us. She was preparing for something. I decided to stop dancing around the truth. While Jordan left to pick up groceries, I asked Lila directly who she'd been calling. She didn't answer. Instead, she unlocked her phone and quickly flipped it around, showing only her home screen. My chest tightened. I asked if the midnight whispering had anything to do with why she arrived, terrified the night we found her. Her jaw tensed before she said, "You're safer not knowing." Those words hit me harder than the storm last night. Safer? Safer? From what? Or from whom? She stood abruptly and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the glass as if checking what waited outside. I realized then that she wasn't watching for danger. She was waiting for it. When Jordan came home, she acted normal, but the worry in her stare toward the street told me her biggest fear hadn't entered our lives yet. That evening, Jordan showed me a text Lila had sent him, thanking him for being kind. Something about it felt wrong. She barely spoke to me, yet she reached out to him privately. I tried to hide my unease, but Jordan noticed and asked why I couldn't give her a chance. I wanted to scream that chances weren't the issue. Truth was, when Lila re-entered the room, Jordan asked if she needed anything else. She smiled so softly, it almost seemed innocent, but I saw the tremor in her fingers as she wiped imaginary dust off the table. It wasn't fear of us. It was fear of time running out. Her eyes lingered on the front door like she expected someone to knock any moment, and in that quiet she whispered, "If I disappear, don't follow." Jordan laughed awkwardly. I didn't. The moment I thought the night would settle, everything changed. Lila headed to her room early, but I noticed her leave her phone on the counter. Face up this time. A message preview lit the screen. "Mara, did they find it yet?" My stomach dropped. Before I could read more, Lila rushed back into the kitchen, grabbing the phone with a force that didn't match her gentle voice. She looked at me, eyes wide like she'd been caught stealing something priceless. Jordan walked in just as she hid the device behind her back, asking what was going on. Lila couldn't form a sentence. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't want this to touch you." Then she backed away, clutching the phone as if the message itself could break us apart. The secret finally had a name. And whoever Mara was, she wasn't done. Detective Hale showed up just after sunrise, knocking with the kind of calm that hides urgency. Jordan answered, confused, while I hovered behind him, suddenly aware of Lila's absence. Hale asked if a woman matching her description lived with us, and Jordan nodded before I could stop him. Something in the detective's eyes sharpened, like he'd just confirmed a warning he hoped wasn't true. When Lila appeared at the top of the stairs, her face drained of color. She didn't ask why he was there. She just whispered, "You found me." Jordan looked between them, lost, and I felt the ground shift under us. Hale, said Lila, wasn't who she claimed that she'd been involved with someone dangerous. Lila stepped forward, shaking, and told me not to trust him. The air filled with unasked questions, and for the first time, I couldn't tell who the real threat was. The man at our door, or the woman in our home. Hale stepped inside, scanning the living room with sharp, deliberate movements. He didn't sit. Instead, he asked Lila if she planned to keep running. She shook her head slowly, eyes glassy, as though she already knew his next sentence. I asked what she'd done, but he ignored me, speaking only to her. When Jordan insisted on knowing what was going on, Hale finally said Lila had been connected to someone tied to a string of break-ins targeting couples. Always couples. My skin prickled. Lila's voice cracked when she said she wasn't part of it, that she'd tried to stop something before it reached us. But Hale only sighed like he had heard that excuse before. Jordan rubbed his temple, trying to make sense of it all. I watched Lila's trembling hands and realized fear looks different when the person you're fearing is yourself. After a long silence, Hale asked to check Lila's things. Jordan agreed too quickly, desperate for clarity. But Lila stepped in front of him and said she wouldn't allow it. Her defiance surprised me. It didn't seem like guilt. It seemed like desperation. Hale warned that refusing only made things look worse. Lila whispered that everything he suspected was wrong, that she wasn't the one we needed to fear. The look she gave me lingered too long, like she was begging me to remember every strange moment since she arrived. Jordan pulled me aside, asking if I believed her. I wanted to say no, but the truth twisted in my throat. Nothing about this felt simple, and when Hale pulled out a photo he claimed proved she'd been watching couples for months, Lila collapsed into a chair, covering her face as though bracing for the blow she knew was coming. Hale laid the photo on the table, and when I leaned in, I felt a cold wave rush over me. It wasn't just a picture of a couple. It was a picture of us, taken months before we met Lila. The angle, the distance, the timing, it all felt too precise. Jordan cursed under his breath, demanding to know why she'd been watching us. Lila shook her head, insisting the photo wasn't hers, that someone else had framed her, but her voice broke on the last word. Hale said she'd been running with a partner named Mara, and the name struck me like a spark. Lila looked terrified, not guilty. She whispered, "If Mara finds me, she'll find you too." The room tightened around us. For the first time, Jordan looked at Lila not with pity, but with fear. Hale said he needed to take Lila with him for questioning, but she backed away until her shoulder hit the wall. She begged me with her eyes, whispering that leaving with him would end everything. Jordan stepped closer to her, torn between fear and empathy, while I tried to steady my voice long enough to ask what Mara wanted. Lila didn't answer the question. Instead, she said something that lodged itself deep inside me. "Someone chose you long before I arrived." Hale reached for her arm, but she slipped past him, running for the back door. Jordan yelled her name, but she was already outside. Swallowed by the fog, Hale rushed after her, flipping a badge from his coat. The echo of the door slamming behind them left the house trembling, and for the first time I wondered whether chasing her was safer or far more dangerous. The house felt hollow without Lila in it, like her absence revealed every shadow she'd been trying to hide. Jordan kept pacing, replaying the moment she ran, trying to convince himself we'd misunderstood everything. But I couldn't shake the image of the photo. Us, captured before she ever entered our lives. I searched the living room again, hoping to find something she left behind, something that could explain why she'd watched us. When I bumped the bookshelf, a small envelope slipped out from behind a row of paperbacks. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were tiny printed thumbnails, surveillance-style shots of our home from different angles. My throat tightened. These weren't taken by chance. They were part of a pattern. Jordan stared at them in disbelief, finally realizing Lila's fear wasn't random. Someone had been tracking her. And us, before she arrived. I needed answers, so I followed the thin trail of clues Lila had left. One photo showed a storage facility tag at the bottom corner. Jordan insisted on coming with me, though his voice wavered. The facility sat on the edge of town, quiet, rows of metal doors stretching like a maze. When we found the unit number from the photo, my pulse hammered. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Shelves lined the walls, holding boxes labeled with dates. I opened the top one and felt my breath vanish. Inside were dozens of photos of us, our neighbors, and couples we didn't know, each taken from different angles, some zoomed in too close. Jordan whispered that this looked like an investigation, not a crime. But I couldn't ignore the chill crawling up my spine. If Lila had been watching us to protect us, then who was watching her? Jordan pulled another box down, revealing notebooks filled with dates and short-coded entries. Some were crossed out, others circled. One name repeated in almost every section, Mara. I felt a chill deeper than fear. This was the same name from Lila's phone. I flipped through the pages until one note stopped me cold. They're next. Jordan tried to reassure me, saying we didn't know who they meant. But the way the dates lined up with the photo of us left little doubt. Lila hadn't been random. She hadn't been desperate. She'd been terrified. Jordan asked quietly why she never told us. I didn't know. Maybe she thought we wouldn't believe her. Maybe she didn't trust us. Or maybe the truth was too dangerous to say aloud. The more I looked around, the more it felt like this storage unit wasn't Lila's secret. It was her warning. As we searched deeper, Jordan found a locked tin container beneath a stack of folders. My breath caught. It looked like something meant to be hidden, not stored. He pried it open with a metal ruler until the latch snapped. Inside were more photos, but these were different. They showed Lila with another woman, taken in dim parking lots and alleyways. The same woman appeared in every shot. Sharp-eyed, dark-haired, watchful. Mara. But then I found one photo that made me stagger. It showed Mara standing across the street from our home months ago, staring directly at the camera. Jordan whispered that this went beyond anything we imagined. My hands shook as I realized Lila hadn't been the threat. She'd been the shield, trying to keep Mara from getting closer. And we'd pushed her away. Just as we prepared to leave, I noticed a small metal case tucked behind a shelf. Something about it felt more personal than the others. When I opened it, a folded sheet of paper lay on top of a key, identical to the one Lila carried. My heart pounded as I unfolded the note. It wasn't addressed to anyone, just a warning. If she reaches the house, don't let her inside. I pressed the paper to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Jordan whispered that maybe the key opened something important, something Lila didn't want Mara to find. I stared at the warning again, wondering if we were already too late. Outside, a car door slammed, echoing through the rows of units. Jordan grabbed my arm, pulling me deeper into the shadows. Whoever had arrived wasn't Lila, and they weren't here by accident. We froze inside the shadows of the storage unit, listening for footsteps. The sound of gravel shifting put my heart in my throat. Jordan peeked through the narrow gap and whispered that someone was walking between the rows. The footsteps paused right outside. Then a soft female voice said, "You shouldn't be here." The tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed. When the figure stepped inside the doorway, the dim light revealed the face from the photos. Mara. She looked composed, almost calm, like she already knew what Wood found. Jordan stepped in front of me, but she didn't move closer. Instead, she studied us like pieces in a puzzle. She was tired of solving. She said Lila had run off again, and that we'd complicated things by digging. I asked what she wanted from us. Her answer was simple. The truth Lila refused to give, and the way she said it made my skin crawl. Mara stepped inside slowly, scanning the photos, notebooks, and coded entries scattered across the boxes. She said Lila had stolen them, claiming she could expose the people behind the operation Mara once belonged to. Jordan asked what that operation was, but she dodged the question, focusing instead on the key in my hand. She said Lila didn't understand how dangerous it was to keep it. I asked whether they were partners. Mara let out a faint laugh, saying Lila was never built for the work she tried to run from. But her eyes softened for a moment, revealing something close to regret. She warned that Lila had dragged us into something we didn't understand, and if we didn't hand her over, things would get worse. Her calmness felt more threatening than anger, and her presence made the entire unit feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. Mara finally admitted the truth. She and Lila had once worked with a group that extracted people from dangerous relationships, except some of their rescues blurred into manipulation and control. Lila tried to break away, but Mara believed she wasn't capable of surviving alone. Jordan asked why Lila had been near our home months before we met her. Mara said they'd been watching someone on our street, someone connected to a previous case. But when I pressed for names, she went silent. Instead, she said Lila fixated on us, convinced we were in danger. Jordan looked shaken, as if pieces were clicking into place he didn't want to acknowledge. Mara warned that Lila's fear made her unpredictable. She needed the key back before Lila used it to finish what she started. My pulse quickened. Whatever the key opened, Lila believed it mattered. Mara believed it threatened everything. The air shifted when Mara said the name of the person they once investigated. A man Jordan recognized from a hospital case years ago. Someone unstable. Someone violent. Jordan's face drained of color. He explained he'd treated the man after an incident that wasn't supposed to be public. Mara said that man had connections. Dangerous ones, and Lila believed those connections were circling back. I felt the world tilt. All this time we thought Lila had invaded our lives, but maybe she'd stepped in front of something coming for us. Mara reached out her hand, asking again for the key. I tightened my grip. Jordan whispered, "We didn't know who to believe." And Mara agreed, but insisted we didn't have the luxury to wait. The truth wasn't that Lila hid everything. It was that she'd been hiding us. Before we could respond, a siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. Mara looked toward the open doorway and swore under her breath, saying someone had followed her. She told us to leave the unit and not look back. Jordan grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the exit. But I hesitated, staring at the rows of boxes filled with secrets. Mara's voice echoed behind us, telling us the past was already catching up. As we stepped outside, the siren cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of a car door slamming. A figure stood at the far end of the lot, half hidden in the fading light. Not Mara, not Hale, not Lila. Someone else. Jordan whispered that we needed to run, but my eyes locked on the person staring back at us. And in that stillness, I realized Act 5 wasn't the beginning of answers, only the end of illusions. We sprinted back to the car, breathless, but I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. The shadowy figure hadn't moved, only watched, as if memorizing us. When we reached the safety of the vehicle, Jordan slammed the locks down and turned the key with shaking hands. He kept saying that this wasn't connected to him, but his voice betrayed something heavier. When I asked what he wasn't telling me, he avoided my stare. Only when we were halfway home did he finally admit that he'd treated the man Mara mentioned years ago, and that the man had whispered Jordan's name as if they shared a secret. That detail alone made my skin crawl. Jordan claimed it meant nothing, but fear flickered in his eyes. We were driving toward our home, but it no longer felt like a place of safety. It felt like the center of something closing in. When we reached the house, everything felt wrong. The porch light flickered even though it had never flickered before. The air felt too still. Jordan stepped inside first, calling for Lila even though we both knew she wouldn't answer. The living room looked untouched, almost staged. I walked toward the hallway and stopped when I noticed something missing. The silver key. Not mine. Lila's. The drawer where she'd once hidden her things was open. A single slip of paper lay inside it with shaky handwriting. "You're not safe here." My throat tightened. Jordan said we should leave, but before we could grab anything, a soft thud came from upstairs. Not loud, controlled, like someone closing a door gently. We froze. Whatever danger Lila feared wasn't coming. It had already arrived inside our home. We crept upstairs together, each step slower than the last. The hallway looked normal, but the air carried the wrong kind of silence. The kind that waits. As we passed the guest room, I noticed the window was cracked open. Wind rustled the curtains, carrying the scent of rain. Jordan whispered that maybe Lila had returned, but I knew that wasn't her style. She wouldn't leave warnings and then slip inside silently. When we reached our bedroom, I saw it immediately. A folder lying on the bed, placed deliberately. Inside were more photos. But these weren't surveillance shots. They were hospital documents. Jordan's name appeared on each one. Every patient involved in violent domestic cases from his early years was listed, circled, annotated. I stared at him in disbelief. He said he'd never seen these, but the way his hands shook made me wonder if he feared he had. Jordan finally confessed what he'd been hiding. Years ago, he'd been involved in a case where a victim refused to give information, terrified of someone pulling the strings behind the scenes. Jordan had been warned to stay out of it, but he'd helped anyway, pushing the report forward. The victim disappeared shortly after, and rumors spread that someone had blamed Jordan for disrupting things. I felt my heartbeat stutter. This wasn't random. It wasn't Lila choosing us. It was someone circling back to an old grudge. Jordan said he never told me because he thought that part of his life had ended, but the documents in our room suggested someone had been watching him for years. And Lila, instead of running from us, had been running toward us to stop what we never knew was coming. Before we could process anything, a sudden tapping came from the back of the house. Light, deliberate, like a coded signal. Jordan motioned for me to stay quiet as he moved toward the window, but I felt drawn to the sound, compelled to know who was behind it. When I reached the hallway, a figure stepped into the faint porch light outside. Lila. She was soaked from the rain, chest heaving, eyes wild with urgency. She pressed her hand to the glass and mouthed, "Let me in." But the warning from the note echoed in my head. My hands trembled. Jordan appeared beside me, torn. Lila whispered through the glass, "She's coming." And before we could react, another silhouette appeared behind her in the rain, motionless, waiting. Not Mara. Someone else. Someone darker. Lila kept her palm against the window, begging us with her eyes. Jordan reached for the lock, but I grabbed his arm. The note in the drawer had been too clear. Lila shook her head urgently, her breath fogging the glass. "Please," she mouthed again. The shadowed figure behind her didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched us with unnatural stillness. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Jordan whispered that we couldn't leave her outside, but fear twisted through me. Lila's gaze flicked toward the shadow behind her, then back to us, silently ordering us to listen. When she stepped aside, we finally saw the figure's face, half lit, masked by the rain, but unmistakably familiar. The man Jordan had treated years ago. The one who'd vanished. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Every secret Lila held, every lie she told, had been to keep this moment from happening. And now it was here. Jordan reached for his phone, but Lila slammed her palm against the glass, shaking her head violently. The man behind her stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat, each movement slow and deliberate. I whispered that we needed to run, but Jordan insisted we couldn't leave Lila. Just as he turned toward the back door, Lila mouthed a single word, "Key." My breath hitched. I pulled out the silver key she'd left behind. Lila nodded urgently, motioning toward the living room, then toward the basement door, as if urging us to hide something. The man behind her knocked once, soft, calculated. Lila flinched. Jordan whispered that she wasn't asking us to let her in. She was telling us how to survive. I grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the basement door, clutching the key so tightly it cut into my palm. We hurried down the basement steps, the air growing colder with each creak. The shadows seemed deeper than usual, swallowing the light. Jordan asked what the key could possibly open, but before I answered, I spotted a small lockbox wedged behind an old cabinet. Dust coated its surface, but the shape matched the key perfectly. My hands shook as I turned the lock. Inside was a single flash drive and a handwritten note from Lila. This is why she followed me. If he gets inside, destroy it. My stomach twisted. Jordan handed me a lighter from the shelf, saying we couldn't let whatever was on it fall into the wrong hands. But when I held the flame close, something inside me resisted. If this drive held the truth about Lila, Mara, and the man outside, burning it felt like erasing our only chance to understand. Before we could decide, footsteps thudded above us. Slow, heavy, too controlled to be Lila's. Jordan pulled me into the deeper shadows of the basement, and we listened as the floor creaked, each step drawing closer to the basement door. My breath trembled. I clutched the drive, unsure if it protected us or doomed us. Then the basement door rattled. Jordan grabbed a piece of wood like a weapon. I held the lighter. The door creaked open an inch, then stopped. A voice whispered down to us. Not the man's, Lila's. She told us to stay hidden, that she had one last thing to do. Jordan tried to call back, but I stopped him. Her voice sounded broken, like she'd already chosen her fate. The door closed again. A moment later, a violent crash echoed from upstairs, followed by a scream that tore through the house. We rushed upstairs, hearts pounding. The living room was in chaos. Furniture overturned, the front door hanging open. Rain soaked the floor. Lila lay near the doorway, bruised but conscious, clutching something close to her chest. The man was gone. Jordan knelt beside her, begging her to stay awake. She looked at me, tears mixing with rainwater, and placed a small folded photo in my hand. It showed our house circled in red, taken long before we moved in. She whispered that the man had chosen this house years ago, long before we stepped inside, and she'd been trying to stop him ever since. Her body went limp, and paramedics, called by a neighbor, arrived moments later. As they carried her away, I unfolded the photo again. On the back, in faint handwriting, she'd written, "The house was never yours. It was the target." And with that, the final truth settled like a shadow that would never fully leave.